Hey everyone, welcome back to the Dreaming Forward podcast. And today we're going to be continuing our discussion on workforce planning and especially talking about the basics of workforce planning. So, workforce planning 101. This time, I want to spend time discussing how it plays out in practice through the various HR processes that we all hopefully know and love, but maybe know and hate. And those three are performance management, onboarding, and leadership development. Contrary to popular belief, all three processes happen for everyone, but they look a little different depending on who you are. So let's just get right into it. We talked in the last episode about how workforce planning involves four steps, and that is analyzing the current workforce or assessing the current workforce, imagining the future workforce, assessing the gap, and analyzing that gap to see what's missing, and then finally implementing a plan. That implementation doesn't just happen in a bubble, it happens through existing processes. One of the main ones where this happens is in performance management. We want to see what are people accomplishing in the company. But performance management can get tricky. Performance management involves ongoing coaching between people managers and their direct reports. It involves performance appraisals, which are the formal conversations that go in an employee's formal record. It also can involve things like opportunities to get feedback on projects from external stakeholders. So, for example, if I work on a special project with someone, they may tell me good job and write me a note. That's not my formal appraisal, nor is it my manager coaching me, but it is feedback that speaks to the quality of my performance. Anything dealing with performance management should be for the goal of developing the employee. I'm going to say that again. Any step taken, any action related to performance management should be for the goal of developing the employee. As an HR leader, I'm going to be honest, I have seen, have participated in, have been the object of coaching out, meaning you want that person to go, you know that they're not a fit, and rather than spend time to find out how things can work, how you can work together, where they might be a better fit, you just want to coach them out of the company. And it's not fair to that person. It doesn't feel good. It is immature, if I'm going to be completely honest. And it is a reflection of our own cowardice as leaders to avoid conflict in many cases and leverage solid and appropriate conflict management skills to build relationships with our direct reports. That's just the honest truth. And again, I'm speaking as someone who has done it and where it has been done to me and where I've seen it. So I'm not escaping culpability in this conversation at all. I don't want y'all to think that. Why I speak so strongly about performance management as a tool is because, again, you're dealing with humans. And I mentioned that in the last episode. People deserve to grow in every role at every stage. Sometimes you might just be the right now job for someone. Sometimes you're that person's dream job. Sometimes you're that person's, I'm not really sure what I'm doing, but I'm going to try this new thing job. Wherever you land on the spectrum of someone's own career trajectory, we still should have a commitment to giving them a great experience where and how we can. Performance management plays a great role in that. The beginning of performance management is not the performance appraisal, nor is it coaching. The beginning of performance management is in the job description. So a job description has been written appropriately and is connected to the business's goals. It's connected to something like a competency model in the company, which I haven't discussed, but I think I'm going to do an episode on that. But if it's connected to something solid that is measurable and is related to something bigger than just that role, it makes it easier to manage performance and know that it's fair because it doesn't become punitive and it doesn't become an isolating factor. When a job description is just more reactive and a job description is completely unrelated to the business's goals or anything else happening in the company, it feels isolating, and any dings on their performance appraisal Anything you say that reflects poorly on their performance seems punitive because, again, it's not connected to anything. So we want to start with making sure that that job description is accurate, that it is solid, that it is behavioral based, and that it is grounded in larger work that is happening at the team, department, and company level. The next part of performance management to think about is that it is progressive. Performance management is not just a one time event. Again, it's those informal coaching conversations like one on ones or team meetings where you may be giving people feedback about a group project or upcoming work projects. It's also where you look at peer-to-peer relationships. Does that person have a mentor? Does that person have a buddy? Does that person have someone to help them understand expectations? Does that person have someone working with them on projects that complements their style? All of that helps to ease the performance management process because you know, as a leader, you've given them the chance to do their best. And finally, if you think about performance management as a tool, performance management is a chance to create a monument of growth for an employee to look at later. You go back to your worst job in your career. I mean, the job that when you think about it, just is more than a cringe. It's like you pretty much just shrivel up into a little ball. What would your performance evaluation have said? Would you even feel comfortable looking at it, showing it to other people? Would you feel comfortable talking about that experience? Whether you admit it or not, that's a monument. That's something that sticks in your mind and is your stake in the ground to say, I was here and here's what I accomplished when I was here. We want to create monuments where people can see their growth pattern and where we have done our best to create interventions to support their growth. Everybody's not going to accept the feedback. Everybody is not going to take on the action items in the same way. But hopefully, what you do is create opportunities for honest conversation so that people can show up fully as themselves. And you, as a leader, can be able to at least try to create that safe space where even you can respond. I'll give an example. I had a job where, ironically, I was talking about job descriptions just now, but I was hired in to do a particular job. And then I quickly saw, well, not quickly, it took about a year, maybe close to a year and a half. And I realized I was not doing that job. And when I first started, they said, oh, it's going to take us some time. We're just clearing out some old projects, but then we're going to get to that. And I stopped and said, okay, are we going to get back to that? Am I doing my job? And I happened to work in a department where I could see the back end HR admin stuff. And I saw the job description of, I saw the job posting that I applied to and was hired into. Of course, you know, in the system, it's a job rec. So I could see that rec and see all the tasks that I'd applied to, and I was not doing any of those. So I'm like, what the heck? You know, where what's going on? And I remember asking my manager, and she said straight up, no, you're not doing that. I know. I was hoping you would notice because you're really good at your job, and there probably won't be a chance for you to do that. And I told her honestly, I said, I enjoy you so much. I really like you, but I hate this job that y'all have me doing now. It's a step back for me in my career, and I'm not going to be able to stay here. So in the next couple months, I'm going to be gone, but I'm going to try to set up my work so that somebody else can come in after me and just take it and run. And when I got out that meeting, I couldn't believe I said that. I was like, are you kidding me? Did you just tell your boss you about to quit? What in the world? Are you nuts, girl? But I felt so empowered. And to her credit, as a leader, we could always come to her honestly and say, I'm irritated about this or what's going on with that. And she knew how to calm us when needed. She knew how to challenge us when needed. And it was a lot. We had a pretty large team. I think it was 6 to 8 people. So it wasn't small, but it was to me, it was a sizable team for the type of work they had us doing. And that was one of my first experiences with standing up for myself. But again, I just want to share that it wasn't just me. It was the space that she created as a leader for me to have those types of conversations. And I've had other jobs where I've had to have difficult conversations about my performance. And my feedback to them was, hey, actually, I've been doing this other work for someone else which is why I'm not doing my own work. Essentially, I was doing my old boss's work. And the response was, well, we need you to do this. And I realized I'm not willing to chase my tail to perform for y'all. So I think I'm just going to leave. Another moment where a part of me was like, girl, are you crazy? Why are you leaving this job? But I think it, again, was another hallmark for me of got to stand up for myself. And sometimes that means we're going to find middle ground. Sometimes you can be reassigned. Sometimes you can be on stretch projects to kind of fill in some of that like area where you'll languish. But then other times it just means that we need to leave. And so managers that create space for people to be honest about what they need, whatever that outcome may be, are a gem. As weird as that sounds, you want people to exit themselves out if they see they're not a fit on something, especially if it's not stuff that can change. You want people to tell you what they need. So if you can feel the need, you can do it. And then you want people to be receptive to your feedback too. That's all a part of the management process. Let's talk about leadership development and workforce planning. I think that's a good segue to that, because leadership development doesn't just happen when you pick a person to say that they're a leader. Me mentioning about creating those safe spaces, that is a key aspect of leadership development. Regardless of how those managers might have defined it, them empowering me to speak up for myself put me on a journey to benefit in ways that support me as a founder right now. That's leadership development. Even though the response was, hi, I'm about to get the heck out of here. You don't know, you can't always predict where the benefits of your leadership development interventions will come from. So you hope that the leadership development investment will lead to benefits for the current company and in the current role. But you can't always predict that, because there are other macro level interventions and events that are happening that will impact that. But you still have a commitment to do it anyway. This connects to workforce planning because I think some companies hold back on investing in emerging talent or are hesitant to do workforce planning because they don't know if that ROI will come back to them. So essentially, you want to eat from your own orchard. And I totally understand it. You spending money, you should be able to get that money back. But the process of getting back what you put in with you in your company is a longer runway than just one leadership development program or paying for one certification. That is the trust, the intimacy, the joy, the satisfaction, the recognition, the rewards. That's all those things, plus the investment in their leadership path, that leads them to say, oh, you just paid for me to go to college. You just paid for me to get this certification I've been wanting. You just paid for me to go to this conference. Oh, I'm going to come back and work 10 times harder for the next year or 5 years or 7 years. That's a long runway. And I think sometimes as leaders, we can be a little arrogant because we feel that the investment that we're making is monumental to us, without paying attention to all of the supposedly little things that we may have overlooked that were monumental or even sometimes red flags. So I can think of a couple people in both my clients and in my own career from coworkers where the company paid for somebody to do something and that person was gone within 6 months. And it makes me think back to some old tuition reimbursement policies that pretty much said, and some of y'all might still have this actually, but that would say, hey, you got to stay for like 2 years or 3 years after you finish your degree, or you're going to have to pay all of this money back. But it was so interesting because the people that they invested in who skedaddled super fast, they got it over a person who would have been loyal for years and years. They just needed just a little bit of push, just a little bit of eyesight and insight into them and their potential. So again, going back to workforce planning, leadership development is happening for everybody, whether it is because you are investing or whether it's because you are divesting or divesting from them. So when you choose not to invest in someone's leadership development, that is also a way to show up in leadership development, because the absence of that development is contributing to their further stagnation. And this is going to be particularly sticky if you find that the people who you choose to divest from share similar identity dimensions. So if the only people you invest in tend to be men, or tend to be white people, or tend to be people who share the same race as the people manager, because that happens too. So if I'm black and I only send the people for this certification in the department who are black too, that could be an area of bias, and you need to address that. Workforce planning is a part of that too. The last area I want to discuss is onboarding. So when you think about workforce planning, that starts from the very first day that someone starts. So when they send in that new hire packet and they click accept offer and they get their start date, and you tell them what location to show up in, or you send them the Zoom link to have their first meeting, that is the first day that they are officially a part of the retention side of workforce planning. You might choose to create a form for people that says, hey, what are your career goals? Maybe the first couple one-on-ones in with their manager are spent talking about career goals, how they want to leverage past skills to build their career, what are going to be the big rock projects that the manager will assess to determine whether or not they're a fit, etc. All of those things should be showing up, because now you can start to plan for who's in the organization and what are they going to add next. Super important. I think, it's just me, I think that the first 90 days of anyone's journey is where you not only capture them as an employee, but also as a customer. Because there are some companies that, based off of the way I was treated in my first 90 days, I would never buy anything from them again. I avoid these brands at all costs. And I know quite a few other people who think the same way. And so I want you to be mindful of that customer or consumer employer brand loop, that your employees could also be your consumers, who could also become employees, who are consumers, etc. And consumer branding, of course, includes not only the people who buy your products or services, but also onlookers and fans. So sometimes people just love your social media presence. Sometimes people just love a report you put out, or when you publicize a town hall or something like that. So keep in mind, people speak about your brand from day one, and other people are looking at folks' experience to see if it's worth their time. We've discussed performance management, leadership development, and onboarding. If you had to think about which is most important to you when considering how workforce planning is implemented, which is most important? Again, performance management, onboarding, or leadership development? I think for me, to be quite honest, I think it's leadership development. I think it's leadership development for me, because so many people, let me back up. I think in a system design, and the job that you hired somebody in to do is just their starting point. They could go all over. So it's a career lattice, not a ladder. So you might have hired them for sales. They could end up being your best HR executive one day. You just never know. By positioning them to grow and learn and be mentored and sponsored and see people and gain visibility through those development interventions, you have no idea the exponential returns that you get, even just from being a spectator in some ways, not just a consumer of someone's talent, but to see it. There have been people who I've watched blossom, and it just was like, wow. It's just so heartwarming. And you want to be a part of those stories. We all love to see the story of the person where, oh, I started out as an intern and then I grew to be the chief of blah, blah, blah. We love those stories because it shows where someone was willing to take the time to put back in them. So I love leadership development. I think it's always a worthy exercise. I don't always think that being a people manager is the purpose for that. And actually, let me say that here. This is a little bit of an aside, but it's still on point, because workforce planning should also be your way to create multi-pronged development pathways. It is a dangerous game to play if the only way people can be recognized or promoted is into people management, excuse me. So if the only way someone can be recognized is by becoming a people manager, that's dangerous, because people management is a skill. It's a skill set. It involves very real competencies that everybody does not have and everybody does not want. Everybody don't want to manage people. I'll be honest, I don't really like managing people all the time. That is not my favorite thing. I like to do my work. You have to create other paths for people. And by creating other paths for people to grow, not only will you boost retention, but you also make it easier to plan the workforce, because some people are just super dope, like project managers, essentially. So they could go from project to project. And by them being so agile and flexible, it saves you a ton of money on hiring and that churn, because you don't have to worry about firing somebody or having a contract and then you got to bring somebody else on. They have the organizational knowledge because they've been there a while, the desire to have an ending to something, so they're not holding on to a project or a role for dear life, and the excitement about what's to come. So you're not going to have that pushback with change like you would for some other people. Just think about it, create some different pathways. Everybody doesn't need to become a people manager in order to go up in a company, because you could be setting them and whoever will report to them up for failure. What about you? What you think? Performance management, leadership development, or onboarding? Which do you think is most important in workforce planning? Share down below in the comments. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. And tell me what you think about this whole series so far with workforce planning. We've now seen 2 parts. I'm interested to see what this is bubbling up for you. Again, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Take care. Bye.